Say this. Good evening, everybody. Back live on a Thursday night. My name is Stephen Rabinowitz.
My name is Jay Kaplan.
I'm Anthony Strait.
This is On the Sports Lines for Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. A lot of twos in there. We will start this week with the opener, with the beginning of an era and the end of an era. Not the beginning of an error like the Jets. It's the beginning of an era. So the Miami Dolphins, because we like to talk about teams in the AFC East who are thriving, they're 3-3 and going into their bye week down just one game in the AFC East. And in second place, QB Ryan Fitzpatrick has been more Fitzmagic than Fitztragic. However, after prize number one pick Tua Tagovailoa made his debut in one series in garbage time and sat on the 20-yard line as a big accomplishment for his one series, but hey, he came back from a lot, so I'm not going to give him credit for that.
But and he was talking to his parents. Come on.
Okay, that's fair enough. Anyway, the Dolphins announced him to be the starter after the bye week. It was a little auspicious considering Fitzpatrick has been doing well. Like I said, more Fitzmagic than Fitzpatrick. So, Jay Kaplan, starting with you. Why now?
You know what? What's that old saying, guys? All good things must come to an end. In the case of both Tua Tagovailoa and Doc Emrick, it applies just differently. Like you said, Rabbi, the Dolphins are now 3-3 in the mix in the AFC East. That coming off that 24-0 win over the Jets, due in no large part to the play of Ryan Fitzpatrick. And they decided, for some reason though, that it was time for the veteran quarterback to give way to his rookie understudy. Now, look, while Fitzpatrick knew that he was keeping the seat warm until the team decided it was time for Tua to take over, and he had embraced his role as mentor to the rookie, saying he would be Tua's biggest cheerleader when the rookie finally took over the starting job, but he didn't think it was going to happen on the heels of an impressive win in the first half of the season with the team being very competitive. I mean, the biggest thing here, I guess, is what's most unfortunate about the change is that head coach Brian Flores didn't get a chance to address the team before it leaked onto social media via ESPN and other outlets on Tuesday. Could it mark the end of Fitzpatrick's tenure in Miami? Could it mark possibly the end of his 16-year career after this season? Who knows? I mean, Flores did say that the move had nothing to do with Fitzpatrick's play, and it was all about the development they'd seen in Tua, determining that he was ready. I mean, you alluded to it, Rabbi. He has been more Fitzmagic than tragic. 70% completion, 1,500-plus yards, 10 touchdowns against only 7 picks, and a 95 passer rating. Flores was very commendable about Fitzpatrick, saying he didn't know of anyone who had been more instrumental in trying to instill a culture and embody a lot of the things the team is looking for from a toughness, competitive team-first perspective, and that the almost 38-year-old has made an impact on the 22-year-old and a lot of other players. But for Fitz, this still kind of hurt. I mean, what did he say today? My heart just hurt all day. It was heartbreaking for me. That's the decision and the direction that the organization is going in. And this eventually was going to happen no matter what. It was just a matter of when, not if. But it still broke my heart yesterday, and it's a tough thing for me to hear and to now have to deal with. I'm going to do my best with it, and no one on the team doubts that as Fitzpatrick is known throughout the league for his friendliness and his big heart, and he extended both to Tua early in the rookie's arrival. And it showed, in Tua's comments after learning that he was going to be starting after the Dolphins bye week. It kind of hurts me in a way to see Fitz hurt. Tua said, I'm just very lucky to have someone like Fitz in my corner, regardless of the situation we're in right now. I hate to say it like this, but it's like this, like father and son. I mean, Fitz said that he's going to do his best for Tua to help him out because, there's two separate situations here. One is with Tua. Fitz wants him to do well and thinks he's a great kid and has a really bright future. The other situation is Fitz's own feelings and just kind of what he's going through and has to be separate from when he walks into – he has to separate himself from that when he walks into the team's facility after the bye and help this kid out to get him ready. He's got to be a professional, and he's going to help Tua out the best he can. And this guy's a class act, and I think we saw some of that during the time in which he played for the Jets. And obviously, while the timing of the start of the Tua era may have some around the NFL scratching their heads, Tua could do worse than emulate the guy who will now hold the proverbial clipboard for him. I know it's a Microsoft Surface tablet, but you see where I'm going with this.
You know what? Rabbi, you tested, sent that test out early in the morning that the quarterback switch being made. And I merely just went to my phone and say, okay, what exactly did Fitzpatrick do to lose his starting job? I was like, okay, back-to-back 24-point wins, 12th in passing yards, 5th in completion percentage, 7th in QBR. The Miami Dolphins are actually competitive for a change. And I'm like, why would they why did they make this switch now? It reminds me, you know what? It reminded me back in 2004 and the Giants with Kurt Warner. The Giants were 5-4. They were virtually they were a playoff team. They were in the playoff chase, and they decided to go with Kurt Warner before the game against the Atlanta Falcons, and they just decided the future was now. But at the same time, they gave up a chance to make the playoffs with a mostly veteran Giants team. So that's what this kind of reminds me of. Look, I wonder how much this decision was made by the front office. I mean, look, they put a lot of stock into drafting Tua Tagovailoa. You knew that Fitzpatrick was kind of was just more of the stopgap or the bridge to Tagovailoa eventually being the long-term starter. You just think that it would be in week 6 and going into a bye week when the next game is against the Rams of all teams, and now you got a rookie quarterback that's going to have Aaron Donald breathing down his neck for 4 quarters, and only got 7 days or so to really prepare for it because most teams don't work out or really do much during a bye week. They kind of stay away from the practice, from the team facilities to go home and they enjoy the downtime. But I mean, like I said, the switch is curious because I can understand that the Miami Dolphins are maybe 2-4, 1-5, and Fitzpatrick was kind of throwing the ball all over the place and not playing well. But Miami's has actually been very competitive. I mean, this is a stark 180 to how we was looking at the Dolphins around the same time a year ago. Yeah. And I say a lot of that has been a good credit to Brian Flores and kind of the culture that he's brought in that locker room. And now you make the decision to go to a younger, the rookie on a young team that was starting to build some confidence and maybe feel like they can possibly compete for a division title in an AFC East that's wide open. I mean, the era of Tom Brady and the Patriots dominated appears to be over because New England suffered a loss. Buffalo lost this past week as well. And the division's wide open. Like the Jets are literally the only team that are virtually out of that division race.
Not virtually.
And
still virtually. They still have a mathematical chance.
We'll get to them. We'll get to them later on in the show. But yeah, like I said, I wonder how much of this is Stephen Ross, the Dolphins front office, maybe seeing that maybe because they maybe that Fitzpatrick playing so well might be a problem. They have to make the switch down the line. But I don't understand why teams don't let young quarterbacks just hold a clipboard and learn. I mean, Alex Smith was basically babysitting the QB position in Kansas City for Patrick Mahomes for a whole year, and that turned out well for both guys. I mean, for the most part, Alex Smith did get a big contract in Washington and was playing well before the injury. And Patrick Mahomes is the Super Bowl and league MVP and a guy obsessed with ketchup, but that's another story. It boggles my mind now at how teams just want things to be done now, and it's not like 20, 30 years ago when you draft a quarterback and you know what, he's gonna be holding a clipboard or a Microsoft tablet nowadays. And just learn and be a student of the game for a year. You just don't see that anymore.
Aaron Rodgers held a clipboard, and back then it was a clipboard for 4 years understudying behind Brett Favre, Rabbi.
But the big difference between all of that stuff is Alex Smith was still a very, very viable quarterback that could lead his team to a division. Brett Favre was a very, very viable quarterback that could lead his team to a Super Bowl. And to an extent, the Packers are doing this right now with Jordan Love because Aaron Rodgers can still play at the highest level. I think Fitzpatrick, you've gotten all that you can possibly get out of Fitzpatrick. I think the Dolphins are not waiting for the minus to come, and why not put Tua in now? I still think it's a curious move, and the timing is curious, but if you're going to do it in the bye week. And you know what? Maybe if you have this much confidence in Tua, maybe you shop Fitzpatrick. Maybe you try to get a second or third round pick. Maybe if Andy Dalton still doesn't do well in Dallas, you bring him to Dallas as a hired gun for a few months.
I don't know if
somewhere as a hired gun.
Maybe. I'm sure if Fitzpatrick wants to find a job after this season because he thinks he still has a chance to start start somewhere. It's entirely possible. He's not going to Dallas. He's going to go somewhere he thinks he's going to start. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up.
You don't think
everywhere
he
he's
start
gone.
over? Wait. You don't think he could start over Andy?
Yeah,
Dalton?
I think he can start over.
No.
Look, Dak Prescott's going to be back next year. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm just talking about just for this year and this year only. I don't think he has.
Have Dallas sign him so he can sit behind Andy Dalton in case of something?
No. He'd start over Andy Dalton. That's
no, because that's not what they brought Andy Dalton in for.
Well,
that's
again, that's going off of the beaten path here. But
yes.
I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is still a viable quarterback.
Agreed.
I think that you might bring him as an insurance policy if Tua doesn't work out. I don't think Ryan Fitzpatrick would fare as good against the Rams as Tua would. Or I think it would be pretty much even. You have nothing to lose in this situation because I don't think Miami was expected to be a playoff team anyway this year. And you're looking towards the future, and I think this is a good move towards the future. I think it's like in the NBA. Do you want to be the 8th seed in the playoffs, or do you want to have a chance to win multiple championships? And I don't think Miami would have a chance to win multiple championships, but you want to have the highest possible ceiling. All right, moving on. Let's go to the end of an era. Doc Emrick has been the voice of the NHL for many years, locally as New Jersey Devils announcer and in many different ways. And he was the voice of the NHL twice, for Fox and for NBC from 2005 to 2020. He is now retired as of this Monday. Anthony, final thoughts on the career of the multiple-time Sports Emmy winner?
You know what? He was Mr. Hockey. I mean, if there was a big game, you know that Mike Doc Emrick, along with Eddie Olszak, was going to be doing that game, whether it was for NBC or in his early days at Fox, where he was working alongside Bill Clement, who was on loan at times from ESPN, since they kind of joint did the Stanley Cup final during that era. But Mike Emrick, like I said, if you're local, you know him from the New Jersey Devils for 22 years, and he was the main play-by-play guy. But I think the national exposure, especially going to Fox, and calling the Devils' first Stanley Cup title run, and while still being the main play-by-play guy, really kind of put him on the map for an American audience, especially anyone who was casual and did not watch hockey. Like, obviously, we do because we're Ranger fans. We grew up following the sport. But Doc Emrick more and more has been more pop cultural in recent years. He was in he was part of the NHL video game franchise as a commentator as well for about 5 years. And obviously I have every game. But you think about all of the key memories, like some that come into my mind as a Ranger fan is Derek Stefan's overtime winner in Game 7 against Washington, TJ Oshie in the Sochi Olympics. Remember 2014, that early Saturday morning shootout when Oshie just kept going again and again, and going to the point where he even admitted he was kind of running out of tricks and kind of suck in the goalie. He called the women's gold medal game also. That was Canada's memorable come from behind win. Just you think about all of the memorable Stanley Cup moments. You think about the frantic final moments in 2008 and 2009, featuring the Red Wings and the Penguins, kind of role reversals in back-to-back years, where the trailing team was frankly trying to score the tying goal to send it to overtime. You think about you also think about just so many memories right now, and it's ironic. And you mentioned it, Rabbi. You mentioned the other night that Gary Thorne, another great NHL broadcaster, his last game was a Tampa Bay Lightning Stanley Cup final win, and it's ironic because Doc Emrick's last call was the Tampa Bay Lightning winning the Stanley Cup this year. So those were the two guys in hockey for me growing up. Obviously in America, and if you watch Canada, it was always Bob Cole, Harry Neal, even Jim Houston. So like those are my 5 hockey Mount Rushmore as far as all-time great announcers. I'll throw in Sam Rosen as well. Obviously, he called the the Rangers went to the Cup in '94. But Mike Emrick is definitely going to be missed. If you go on social media, you see all the tributes and the hashtag "Thank you, Doc" was trending worldwide for a few days. He is definitely going to be a hockey personality that's going to be sorely missed, and some of his play calling quotes, like kitty corner into the kitty into the corner, basically dumping a puck into the corner on the far side of the goalie. So there's a lot of things that I even picked up watching him, and obviously hearing him playing the video games that is going to stick with me for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, for me, obviously, the voice of hockey that pops into my head, being a Ranger fan for the longest time, it's our good friend Kenny Albert, who does their games on radio and occasionally on television. But I mean, what do you say about Doc Emrick? I mean, 50 years as the voice of the NHL. I mean, you run out of superlatives. I mean, what can I use that hasn't already been said? I'm going to borrow from Richard Dice's piece on Emrick for The Athletic. Emrick was the perfect soundtrack for a sport that often accelerates to a top speed faster than the eye can comprehend. I mean, that's one way to describe it, and to me, it's kind of a perfect way too. I mean, to me, Doc is always is the NHL's version of Vin Scully. A pair of Hall of Famers who are as much a part of their sport as the players whose names they call out when goals are scored or home runs are hit. I mean, consider these numbers, guys, and yes, I can even find stats for broadcasters.
You could only find stats for everything. You can't work without stats. It's impossible for you.
It's what I do. An estimated 3,750 professional and Olympic hockey games called, 22 Stanley Cup finals called, 45 Stanley Cup playoff game sevens called. I mean, it boggles the mind just how much a part of the fabric of hockey he has been for the last 50 years. And normally I don't give Gary Bettman a lot of props. None of us do, but I'm going to give him some here. This is a great quote from the NHL's commissioner. Quote, "His command of the English language under the most frenetic conditions defies comprehension. His unabashed wonder at the skill and courage of hockey players, as genuine in his call of Game 6 of the 2020 Stanley Cup Finals as in his first day doing hockey play-by-play in 1971, always reminded listeners and viewers of the marvel he was describing. His reverence for hockey's traditions and history, coupled with his devilish sense of humor, conveyed that while he knew he was calling a game, it was always much more to him than a game." And just like with any other icon of the sport, hockey will not be the same without Doc Emrick behind the mic.
I love his calls with John Davidson, Eddie Olczyk, pretty much, and Bill Clement, obviously. Calling all the Stanley Cup finals is amazing. And again, he's synonymous. But did you know, and here's some trivia. I'm bringing back trivia to you guys tonight.
Good.
He called 7 NFL games in his career for CBS.
No way, really? I did not know that.
Including the first start for one person that we've already mentioned on this show tonight, Brett Favre.
Wow, I did not know that.
Now, here's a question for you. Who caught the first pass that Brett Favre threw?
Wow, you're going back to 1992. Ooh, boy.
Wait, are we talking about his first pass ever or his first pass?
Who caught his first pass ever?
That would be while he was still an Atlanta Falcon.
No. As a Packer.
Oh, okay.
His first start was with the Packers, so.
I'm guessing it's not James Lofton?
Oh, no. The answer is very simple. You'll never get it.
Is it still a shot?
No, it's Brett Favre. Brett Favre actually threw the pass. It deflected off somebody, and he caught it. And that's who caught it. Yes, Brett Favre.
That is an awesome piece of trivia, Rabbi.
You know what? That is
much props for that. Well done. Well done.
I actually looked up that call. It's like Brett Favre throws his pass at himself.
That is the most Brett Favre play. And that was a Brett Favre moment right there. Like him, he would throw a pass to literally himself.
Yes. So, Doc Emrick, we're going to miss you behind the mic, and we're probably going to miss the NHL since it was just announced today that there will be no Winter Classic in 2021 and no All-Star Game in 2021. So, just reminders of the world that we're living in right now. Yep, I take a good moment and I ruin it. Anyway, let's move on to the World Series. It's currently going on. It's in a travel day. It features the best team from the American League and the National League's 60-game shortened season in the Rays and the Dodgers. Whoever wins, their city becomes a double pandemic 2020 sports champion. So more pressure to both. The Dodgers are looking for their first title since 1988, and the Rays are looking for their first title. Anyway, we're going to analyze both of the teams, and then I'll wrap it up with a look to the rest of the series. Anthony, let's talk about Tampa Bay.
You know what I talked last week is kind of like how in the world they actually winning these games, because it literally seemed like it's starting pitching and we just hope for one or two bats and hit a couple of home runs and we seem to be all right. I mean, you think about this, Tampa Bay was 28th in the majors in offense anyway. So on paper, going into this series, you kind of figure that they had to stick to their strength, and that was pitching, a strong deep bullpen. And Randy, I can't pronounce his name. I had it on the tip of my tongue.
Randy Arozarena.
Randy Arozarena, and you would think I would have had it by now. Arozarena basically being a breakout star in the ALCS MVP, and he's been the only bat in this lineup for pretty much the entire postseason. And I was talking to one of my bosses at work, and we were talking about what can the Rays do. And I was like, well, they need somebody else besides him to show up. Brandon Lau, who batted all of 107 the entire postseason, hitting 2 home runs last night. And Tampa is hoping that finally wakes him up, because he had been the best hitter pretty much to the regular season. I mean, you look at it like this, he led the team in home runs with 14. And then you go back to game 1, you felt like the Rays actually went away from what they do best and rely on their bullpen, and leaving Glasgow in the lineup a little too long, leave him in the game, and the Dodgers went on for a big inning. But the Rays do not have the firepower or the deep lineup that the Dodgers have, so they gotta get good pitching performances. Blake Snell gave them a solid effort last night. Charlie Morton is set up for game 3 tomorrow night. They were able to take advantage of the Dodgers going to a bullpen game, which was almost like a gift that the Rays had to take. If they'd have lost that game last night, they'd really be in deep trouble with Buehler lined up for game 3 and possibly still at an 0-3 hole. But they were able to do that. Arozarena, I got his name right this time. I think the Dodgers have been able to slow him down a little bit by keeping pitches down in the strike zone, staying away from his hot zone, which is up and in, and he's been basically tagging home runs all postseason. But Lau coming alive is a good sign that maybe they can get some more offense, and maybe just enough. But like I said, it goes back to the pitching and the bullpen, and the Rays sticking to their strength. I think they kind of went away from it in game 1. They backfired, relying too much on a starter. In this case, they've been winning games in very unconventional methods. And you know what? If it's gotten you this far, you might as well stick with it. And against a Dodger lineup that's this deep, that is always 1 or 2 big innings away from turning into a rout, like we saw in game 1. And like we saw in the NLCS against Atlanta, where they put on a 12 spot before the Braves are able to get in that bat, they're gonna have to rely on the pitching and the defense, and that's what got them to the dance all along. I mean, like I said, I want to see though. If they can generate enough, if 4 runs in a game is going to be enough, because they won last night 6-4, and it looked like they were going to let that game slip away. But also, another thing is, too, they have the better defense, I think, of the 2 teams. And in that stadium, which I thought was a pitcher's ballpark, home runs seem to be flying out of there as of late, they're going to have to try to just pitch and just stick to their strengths.
Yeah, I think we talked about this, and we'll get to you, Jay, in just a second. Game 1, Dodgers needed to win to get Clayton Kershaw's confidence back in the right direction, and the Rays needed to win game 2 because the Dodgers literally had no one to start game 2. And if you get to game 3 and game 4, as they just named Urias the game 4 starter, you got a Buehler-Arias combination, and then a little tricky, and you can have a short series. Jay, the Dodgers, they're looking for their first title in what seems like forever. What are their keys?
Indeed. You guys know the Dickens classic, A Tale of Two Cities, right? Games 1 and 2 were
I don't. Can you describe
two Dodger teams? Get better with your classic literature there, Rabbi.
I didn't learn it back in school. So.
Game one, that Dodger team was the one we kind of expected, and it embodied everything, you expected of the NFL's the National League's best regular season team. Their future Hall of Fame starter was dominant on the mound, and the stacked lineup with two former and one potential MVPs at its core beat up on the opposing pitchers without mercy in the 8-3 win, all 8 runs coming in the 4th, 5th, and 6th innings. Clayton Kershaw gave the Dodgers the kind of outing they expect to get from their longtime ace. 6 innings, 1 run on a solo homer, on only 2 hits, 8 strikeouts, 1 walk. Faced 3 batters over the minimum through only 78 pitches, 53 for strikes. Both of the former MVPs, that'd be Mookie Betts and Cody Bellinger, went yard. They drove in 3 of the 8 runs the team scored. Corey Seager, who may end up being the 2020 National League MVP, was the only one of the Dodgers' big bats who didn't get a hit. And he and Justin Turner were the only ones who didn't drive in a run. Betts, interestingly enough, became the first player in World Series history with a home run, 2 stolen bases, and 2 runs scored in a World Series game. The team cranked out 10 hits and 7 walks, and while they left 9 men on base, they went 5 for 14 with runners in scoring position. That's a 357 clip. Performance like that had folks thinking sweep, even if that scenario was highly unlikely based on who the opponent was, and Game 2 bore that out. And the Dodger team we saw in that game was the one we thought might not make it out of the NLCS. They had to MacGyver a bullpen game, as Anthony alluded to, and none of the arms they ran out there could keep the opposing lineup in check, while their own batting order couldn't seem to execute their plan to take pitches, work counts, get men on base, and then bring them home, either with timely hitting or with bombs leaving the yard. Blake Snell didn't dominate the Dodgers like Kershaw did against the Rays in Game 1, but he struck out 9 in 4 2/3, and while he did allow a home run, as did each of the relievers who followed him, Snell and the Rays bullpen did just enough to ensure that the 6 runs the Rays scored held up. Corey Seager in this game was the only one of the big bats for the Dodgers who did any damage with a solo home run, but it was in the 8th inning when the game was pretty much over. Betts, Bellinger, Muncy combined 0 for 9 with no RBI. They struck out 15 times, only managed 4 walks, and could not create any traffic on the bases. And it was the last thing the Dodgers needed on the night when the combination of Tony Gonzalez and Dylan Floro, Victor Gonzalez, and Dustin May allowed 5 runs on 5 hits, including 2 home runs. May, whom the Dodgers were actually counting on to give them at least 2 shutdown innings in the middle of the game, took the worst of it, 3 runs, 4 hits, 1 homer. Brandon Lau's second of the game in the 5th inning, which put the Rays up 5-0, and the Dodgers never really threatened from any point on. I mean, Game 2 showed that the Dodgers may be in trouble if the only chance they have to win is a game pitched by Kershaw or Walker Buehler, who's going to start Game 3. Because the only way they win the series on those arms, of just their 2 aces, if they manage to get to a Game 7, because that's the only way they'll get Buehler back on the mound after Friday. And if that's the way their pitching is going to go, meaning they repeat Game 2's performance in Game 4, which is likely to follow the same format, the NL's best offense can't afford to take a night off like they did last night. Look, I still think the Dodgers take this series, but it is not going to surprise me if it goes the distance.
If it goes the distance, that's a little bit of a trouble for the Dodgers because Game 7s are kind of unpredictable, as we just saw in the NLCS version, and it needed a Cody Bellinger home run in Game 7 and a celebration that almost cost him the World Series right after that.
It would be Buehler versus Morton round 2. So
it would be Buehler versus Morton round 2, but if the Rays can win one of these next 2 games, and especially get to Urias in Game 4, I think you have Clayton Kershaw having even more pressure on him in a 2-2 series in Game 5, or even worse, a 3-1 series. And if you win that game, you basically force the Dodgers to go all hands on deck in Game 6 when they don't even have a legitimate starter to actually go in that game. Yeah. So I think Game 3 is a game that the Dodgers need to win, and Game 4 is a game that the Rays should hope to win. But as we saw in Game 1 of the Atlanta series, you can get to Walker Buehler and his tight pants, and if that happens,
this is about his pants. It's about the blisters on his hand.
Yeah, well, don't ask him about his pants because then he'll just shut off your Zoom call. Anyway.
I don't know why you're even talking about it.
Well, it was because they asked him and he shut down his Zoom call and didn't talk to the media. And I give crap to anybody who doesn't speak to the media about anything or lashes out. Moving on. The Giants, now currently down 7-0 to the Eagles, are 1 game out of the NFC East lead. Oh my God, that's so pathetic.
How weird does that sound coming out of your mouth, Rabbi? How weird was it to even write that sentence?
It's not weird. It just shows how pathetic the NFC East is. The Giants finally got off the schneid, and it really shouldn't have been this close, but it actually was. 2019 win against the Washington football team last Sunday. They are currently playing a team who is crumbling under expectations, although Carson Wentz just led them on the long drive to take the lead in the first quarter. They're playing the 1-4-1 Philadelphia Eagles. Let's analyze Jets, starting with the offense.
Robert, the thing that stood out for me in last week's win was, and the thing that I kind of wanted to see how it moved forward coming into tonight was the effect of the team's first win on their confidence and what Judge is trying to build here with this team. I said after the final drive loss to the Cowboys that the Giants were so close to getting that first win of the season, and that even though they were 0-5 coming into the Week 6 divisional matchup with the Washington football team who may continue to use that name next season, they were always competitive, always prepared, and always all in on what new head coach Joe Judge was trying to build, which is a stark contrast to the team they share MetLife Stadium with. Granted, Judge has gotten more conservative over the last 2 to 3 weeks, attempting to minimize mistakes on offense. Quarterback Daniel Jones has become more of a game manager than a playmaker. His big plays in the running game aside, how is it that he still leads this team in rushing?
Because they don't have any competent rushers to go against him.
Well, I think Devonta Freeman will get there eventually. Maybe
not competent yet, though.
Not yet. And rely more on a defense that has been improving week by week, as evidenced by returning a forced fumble, 43 yards for a score, and making a stop on a 2-point conversion that would have won the game for Washington. Wasn't pretty, but it was a win, the first one of the Judge era. And I think the coach put it best, quote, "Sometimes you've got to make it a little bit grimy, but that's the way we've got to play sometimes. But I'm proud of the way they played, and I'm proud of the guys. They got to see some tangible results for their work, and they've been working hard," end quote. Look, it's been talked about since spring training that Judge does work the players hard every day, and that could possibly take a toll on them if they kept losing every week. And while beating a Washington team that is among the worst in the NFL should be kept in perspective, the win did allow the Giants to experience a reward for all that hard work that Judge talked about. Jones presented the game ball to Judge, who was then doused with water by a handful of players. I think that'll happen to any other MetLife locker room if the Jets ever win this season. I don't. How will this – the thing is that, and coming into tonight as the Giants are taking the field for their first drive today in tonight's game, how will this feeling feed their confidence in their new coach's system and culture? That remains to be seen. Tonight will be, the first test of that. As I said last week, the offense is still a work in progress. It's apparent that dialing things back on offense to put less of a burden or expectation on Jones to carry the unit is deliberate. And while it may look like the quarterback is taking a step backwards in his development because he's not throwing for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns each week, it may actually allow him to take 2 steps forward down the road when he has his full complement of weapons and an offensive line that can maintain a pocket long enough for him to hit wide receiver Darius Slayton more often for big plays in the passing game. Look, guys, the win is a step forward, and it's a step they needed to take to keep them motivated and increase their confidence in what Judge is looking to build. We'll see, if they take that next step and convert it into a win tonight against an Eagles team that is playing down to the expectations that were afforded.
They're not down to their expectations. They just have nothing right now, weapons-wise, and we'll talk about that in a second. The one thing, and I'm going to go back to what Joe Tafaro said to us 2 weeks ago when he was on this show, Daniel Jones needs Sterling Shepard. You can throw the bomb.
Oh, hell yeah.
You can throw the bomb to Slayton as many times as you want, but if you don't have a check down receiver, and the Giants don't really have that right now, you're not going to be able to be a good quarterback, which is I don't want to make any excuses for Jones because, as I said, he's thrown some bad passes this year, and we're going to agree again that first and 10 pass last week that he just heaved up in the air to try to throw away. Well, he's made bad throws because he's almost forced bad throws. So we'll see what happens with Daniel Jones down the line. I don't think –
Rabbi, I got to say, I agree with you on the Shepard thing. More than – I think even more so than the loss of Barkley, every quarterback needs a guy who moves the chains.
Yeah.
Wes Welker or Julian Edelman, if you will, a guy who consistently moves the chains. That is what Shepard is for Jones. And that part of that dynamic in the offense is very much
especially when you don't have a back who can really consistently catch the ball out of the backfield. All right.
Exactly.
Anthony, defense, only gave up 19 points last week.
Yeah, you know what, Jay? I thought another wide receiver that's pretty good at moving the chain. That's Cole Beasley. I mean, that's a guy that is undersized and keeps a drive going.
Did that
But look at
Dallas?
look at the defense. The defense has played well. Like they have outside of 49 debacle, they have really played well for most of the season. You think about Colin Fackrell, who the week before against Dallas took an interception for a touchdown last week. His strip sack led to the recovery by Tate Crowder, who unfortunately got put on IR this week. The 48-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown. The defense played well, but they almost gave the game away, allowing almost game-winning touchdown drive. And Logan Ryan got beat on a double move for a touchdown. However, Blake Martinez and company were able to at least slow down, at least stop the two-point conversion, and the Giants pretty much handed a victory. I mean, let's just when you win wins, you take the luck, you take the win as much as you can.
Oh yeah,
it wasn't a pretty win defensively. They still got issues with missed tackles, and they still have a hard time getting off the field. I mean, I think we saw it tonight on the Eagles' opening drive. They have the Eagles on third down, and then fourth down, they can't make a stop. Then they get the Eagles backed up, and they give up yards in chunks and give them a reasonable second down. But that's been the problem with the Giants' defense all season, if there has been one. Washington was 8 for 15 on third down and 2 for 2 on fourth downs last Sunday. Then you think about the Giants being ranked 31st in the NFL and opponents still down efficiency on defense and teams converting 53% of the time. Only the Titans is worse, and the Titans actually have a winning record. It's unbeaten, which is one of the stranger things in a 2020 strange pandemic year in the NFL. But teams are converting 57% against the Giants at home at MetLife Stadium, which kind of reminds you just how important the absence of a crowd plays into that, because normally you get the crowd riled out, the crowd noise, and teams unable to heal to play signals.
I don't know. I think MetLife Stadium is probably the best thing to happen to both tenants this year, is that there is no crowd right now to have the quietness or to boo.
I would agree with you for the Jets. I don't agree with you for the Giants.
I don't know. The Giants fans have become impatient. I think it's hard for them to go through reboot after reboot. And if they saw some of the performances that Jones had last week, I think that would have probably given Jones a little bit of a confidence.
Yeah, but I have to agree with Anthony here. I think the Giants fans are recognizing that what Joe Judge is doing is the right way to do it. And there are enough positives that have come out of every game. Look, compare it to the guys down the hall, Rabbi.
You can't compare it to the guys down the hall because you're comparing it to the rest of the league. If you compare it,
not in the confines and in the 3-foot window that is just New York football, and that is how the fans do it. They know.
Yeah, but
in a better position, even at winless, than the Jets were, and they could see the progress being made, and as much as they may have been frustrated with the turnovers, I tell you this, they would have rather taken their 0-5 team than the 0-5 team next door.
We'll talk about that in a second. I have some things about that.
Hey, look, I've been a Giants fan my whole life, and I've seen the old Giants saying during the darker times of the Ray Haley era. It's a telling of Dan Reeves'
Ray Perkins too.
When Dave Brown was quarterbacking, but there was the one thing that was constant, that when the defense was actually playing well, the crowd was into it. And obviously, when you have a young team that feeds on emotion, that crowd noise is not there. You wonder how much that plays into the fact that teams are able to convert so easily on third down. But they also, as you saw tonight, the Giants gives up yards and chunks on first and second down sometimes, and that allows opposing teams to open up the playbook on a manageable 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6, where the playbook is more open. The Giants just not able to get off the field is a major concern, and it led to a touchdown tonight when they had an opportunity to get off the field and at least force a field goal in the worst case scenario. Until they're able to get off the field with more consistency and to be able to get some stops on defense, particularly on third down, they stay on the field long, and obviously the defense is going to get eventually tired from being on the field so much. And it's part of the reason why the offense doesn't get as many snaps in a lot of these games. The Giants really have to figure out a way to get off the field if they're going to be from a solid defense or a good defense that may actually be able to dominate a game at some point.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony, you and I both played the game. Granted, not at the highest level, but you tell me when you were playing, which unit fed off the crowd energy more, the offense or the defense? For me, the defense seemed to feed off the crowd energy more because it's just the way the defense is. They want to get that hype up.
Yeah. The thing is, though, obviously being an offensive player, when we're in a crowd noise, we didn't want the crowd noise because we had to actually hear the play call. We had to hear the sender. We need the quarterback. We need to hear the quarterback. The defense is more of the unit that feeds off the electricity and the energy of the crowd and the chance of defense and the decibel levels going to its highest pitch. We see it in Seattle all the time. With Central Lake Field with the Seahawks and their defense. It brings it back to a Giants game in 2005 when they went to Seattle and that called for 15 false start penalties in that game because the crowd noise was so much and they just had no answer to it. There's a reason why Century Link Field and Arrowhead and even Lambeau Field to an extent is such a hard place to play in because the crowd noise really feeds the home team, particularly on the defensive side. Yeah. Because the defense don't have to hear the play signals. They can use hand gestures. Yep. They can go on a snap count. It's the offense that has to get the rhythm and has to get the flow. And if you're a wide receiver, it's even worse because you're not anywhere near the center. So you have to literally be able to pay attention to what's going on and why you have to look into the line of scrimmage to see when the ball's going to be snapped. Yep. So definitely the lack of a crowd really hurts the defense more than the offense.
Rabbi, I got to tell you, as much as I enjoyed home crowds, being into it, I hated having to constantly do this to get them to shut up. So
how many people did you play over that you had to get him to do this to shut up? Was it like 100?
No, it's hard to look at your quarterback trying to read his lips, but you got a mouthpiece and you're like, what the hell are you saying? I can't hear you. I can't understand.
Well, I did not play the game, so apparently I will not be able to talk in this entire
You called it a hostile like I did.
Yes, but let's just go quickly. Carson Wentz has been really bad in third quarters, but you really see in the fourth quarter he's a gamer. However, I think Philadelphia Eagle fans are growing tired of him and are really saying, hey, Nick Foles won us the Super Bowl. What have you done? Although he was pretty much an MVP that year. It's gone for 45 yards tonight, but the big thing is the injuries. Miles Sanders out for at least this game. Zach Ertz out for the next few weeks. But the Philadelphia Eagles did get Deshaun Jackson back tonight. He's got 2 catches already for 19 yards. But then Travis Fulgham, who? Greg Ward, former emergency quarterback, who? And the man who was the person who caught Aaron Rodgers' big Hail Mary on a Thursday night against Detroit, Richard Rodgers, is now currently receiving a tight end for Philadelphia because of all of the injuries they had. They've had some of the best wide tight ends in the league, and now they have to go to plan D. So I think the Eagles, right now, they've seemed like their offense moved on the first drive, kind of stalled on this second drive. They need to Carson Wentz really needs to lead them on for this team to have any chance. They might be able to win this division again, but I think the Philadelphia Eagles are kind of getting sick of these Super Bowl hopes kind of just drowning every single year. I don't think the Jalen Hurts era is in the near future, but considering the media that we live in these days, I think Carson Wentz's time might be close to done in Philadelphia.
And the Philadelphia media is almost as bad as the New York media.
Absolutely.
They dump all over their sports teams. There's a little bit of pressure on Carson out there to live up to the MVP hype.
It's a weird situation too, because again, this team won a Super Bowl 3 years ago, and because of his injury, a lot of people don't associate that with that.
No, it's the same way that when Hostetler won the Super Bowl for the Giants. People forget Sims is the one who got him there. He just got hurt, so he doesn't get the same, he's not attached the same way. The only reason he gets attached at all is because he went out and won one on his own to kind of take the stigma off of it.
But he's not anywhere near a Hall of Famer.
No. Hey, look, I lived in Philadelphia. That city is tough. The fans are tough. And look, I see them
Santa Claus.
Yeah, I see them dog. And look,
detention cells in the bowels of their football stadium. Really? You think it's a tough city, Ant? You think so?
Hey, look, I seen them dog Donovan McNabb when he really didn't have any weapons to deal with. He was literally single-handedly carrying our offense to championship game appearance one year after year until they finally gave him T.O. And still he had to get that team to the Super Bowl when T.O. went down in the middle of the season. So I seen that. Look, that Philadelphia fan base is passionate. They love their teams, but, man, you think the New York media is tough. Philadelphia will rip you to shreds. I mean, look, if Destiny's Child got no love from the Philadelphia fan base, Carson Wentz's time is ticking at this point.
Yeah, and
don't look now, but for all the crap that Joe and everyone else gives Golden Tate, Jones just hit him for a touchdown on the first play of their second drive of the game.
Jones actually on the third down beforehand, if you didn't see it, had a wide open Slayton, and he just missed him. He won't miss again. God, the NFC.
Nice job by Tate on a combat catch there. Give him credit.
And he was, too, looks like. All right, moving on. In the interest of equal time, it's time to talk about the New York Jets. They lost 24-0 to the Dolphins last week, and again, score does not indicate how bad they lost. The Dolphins are now 3-3, and the Jets are now 0-6. There's one winless team left in the National Football League, and it's gangrene. The spelling, Gangrene.
I knew you were going there.
Right. I've been waiting all month to say that. Jay.
Well played on the pun, Rabbi.
Yeah. Again, anybody can do it, but I have. Jay, Le'Veon Bell getting released and is now going to a team that just ran for 245 yards.
Without him.
Without him. Oh, boy. Jay, what's the impact on the locker room for Bell leaving?
The impact on the locker room and the running back rotation is something that interests me, and I wanted to see because I talked a little bit about this last week on our show last week about the way that Adam Gase has, or more importantly, has not deployed his running backs this season, and how it came to a head as far as Bell was concerned, to the point that he passively aggressively used Twitter to like his way out of town. And after the embarrassing 24-0 loss to the Dolphins, I think it may have gotten worse, if that's at all possible, in that running back room and with the team in general. Frank Gore, who has been Gase's go-to running back this season at age 37, unloaded to the media about the team's awful play. And when a respected veteran like Gore speaks out, people listen a little more intently. Here's the quote, and I'm going to somewhat blankety blank out the F-bombs, if you will. "We can't effing wait until the effing fourth quarter to start playing ball, man," Gore said to NorthJersey.com's Adam Vasquez. "You can't start slow in this league. When you have a chance to make a play, you have to make a play. That goes for me. That goes for everybody on offense." Now, Gore's biggest issue with the offense is that the unit is getting off to slow starts. The Jets are consistently starting games with multiple 3-and-outs, putting themselves in huge holes, and as Anthony has mentioned all season, putting the defense behind the 8-ball. Gore also mentioned how tired he is of seeing plays on film that the team isn't taking advantage of. Quote, "We're just not making them," Gore said, to the Athletic's Connor Hughes, who's the Jets beat writer. Now, the interesting thing is that Gase stressed all week the need to get rookie LaMichael Perrine more involved, something I spoke about on the last show, as Perrine is the only home run threat the Jets have in the running game. Supposedly, after not playing a single snap against Arizona, which still boggles my mind 2 weeks later, Perrine would begin his transition to being the team's featured runner. Gore would still start. He'd still have a role, but Perrine, especially as the game went on, would start to get the majority of the carries. Ready for the numbers, guys? Here they come. Gore had 11 carries for 46 yards on the ground, 4 catches for 24 yards in the air. Perrine, 7 carries for 27 yards, 2 receptions for 9. The Jets began the third quarter.
It's moving on.
Yeah. The Jets began the third quarter down 21-0. Perrine had 1 catch and 1 carry the entire second half. Are you kidding me? Really? And as Connor Hughes said in his piece for The Athletic, quote, that is absolutely unacceptable, and I agree with him. Gore's a likely Hall of Famer. He's been one of the most consistent running backs to ever tote the rock. And the fact that he's still playing at age 37 is amazing. And I hope he can hang on long enough to be playing in the NFL when his son gets drafted. You know, but there was, I can hope, it would be a nice story. But there was zero reason for him to play as much as he did on Sunday, especially with the Jets needing big plays that would lead to points on the board in the second half. Gore should have been getting his snaps in short yardage and goal line situations or pass protection only. Yet Gase was running plays that had him split out wide, running routes, things that should have been done with Bell on a more regular basis when he was a Jet, but were not. Just the latest in a long laundry list of things that Gase has done this season that make no sense whatsoever. He continues to do the exact same thing every week, expecting different results. And I believe that is the clinical definition of insanity. Look, Gordon said he wasn't sticking up for Gase with his comments. He believes the Jets' biggest issue is execution, a thought that's been echoed by the coaching staff amidst criticism of Gase's play calling. Something else Gase said he would consider giving up, but apparently chose not to. The Jets are averaging just over 12 points per game through 6 games. Gore's comments are more than warranted, and how animated he was should speak to volumes about gangrene, and I will spell it the other way, Rabbi, G-A-N-G, space G-R-E-E-N-S, apostrophe S. Problems I honestly don't see getting corrected, guys, not as long as Gase continues to misdeploy his running backs and ask them and the rest of the offense to do things they clearly cannot do. Is Gase losing the locker room? I don't know. That premise is not being bandied about yet, but it cannot be a happy place to be, and that's unlikely to change even if the Jets' record improves. Something else that also seems highly unlikely, the words and actions, guys, of 2 veteran running backs, one gone, one still here, pretty much spell that all out.
Here are some of the guys who have as many carries as Frank Gore this year has.
Ooh, lay it on me, Rabbi.
James Conner, 75. Aaron Jones, 75. People who have less carries than him. Miles Sanders, 71. Alvin Kamara, I know he's a multi-threat guy, 61. Unacceptable. I love Frank Gore to death, but the man has had no real good rushing games this year, 50 to 60 yards. They need a home run threat. They need something. What you have, my friends, is drama. Anthony, speaking of drama, Greg Williams, he had some comments burying the offense last week because, you know, the defense has done so much better. What's that going to do for the Jets?
Yeah, you know what? I said this, and even Joseph Fall, our good friend, agreed. It's a cultural problem in that locker room. And then when you're looking at 2 coaches who are supposed to be leaders in the locker room, kind of throwing tip for tat before a game and even allegedly during a game, CBS cameras kind of caught Gase in a heated conversation with Greg Williams. He tried to clear it up and said he was just wasting frustrations because the officials was complaining about what was going on with the center, how he holding the football during the snap. But look, Greg Williams said taking a shot at the offense, you can't do that. I mean, this is he's showing why he won his welcome in New Orleans and in Los Angeles and in Washington, all these places that he was a coordinator, and why, for the most part, he didn't get the head coach's job in Cleveland for the most, because it's almost like he's so good, but he also was welcomed out by saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. And this remind me of other famous coaches, coordinator, grudge matches, if you want to call it that. I think back to the 85 Bears with Buddy Ryan.
That's exactly the first thought popped into my head. Buddy Ryan and Mike Ditka.
I think about the 93 Oilers and yes, Buddy Ryan walking up to Kevin Greenbaum and punching him in the face in the middle of a nationally televised game.
Yes.
Like it boggles the mind when you have a coordinator and a coach that's so much off on not on the same page that you see literally they're going back and forth. And look, when you see that as a player, I mean, the losing is bad enough. But when you don't get any inspiration from the leadership as a head coach or even a coordinator, look, for what Greg Williams, look, 14 of the points that the Jets gave up weren't on the defense. Granted that you still just shouldn't have said it because the Jets defense did not look prepared at all in any of the games this season either. So it's like, well, it's not like the offense is throwing pick sixes every game and you still can't give up points. I mean, the only thing that happens to the Jets defense is the fact that they held Miami to 3 points in the entire second half. But the game was over by then. I mean, come on. I mean, the Miami Dolphins just happy to get out the field with a win. This team is just 1 week after another is something else, and it's like it's going beyond football right now. Like at this point, Jet management have to blow this up. I mean, like Douglas, he's got to just clean house. You can't. I mean, no, Gates gotta be gone. Greg Williams gotta be gone. You just gotta literally. Just take a wrecking ball. Just go pure Miley Cyrus. Just tear this whole thing down and start from scratch. Because I couldn't believe this when I read about this over the weekend that Greg Williams said something like this, and then Adam Gase basically responded by saying everyone needs to shut up and play. And I'm like, oh yeah, great job, Adam Gase. Way to really douse the fire with gasoline and make it even worse. And then the CBS cameras catch them in a heated discussion, and who knows what they were talking about.
Hey,
but it was more exciting than the actual game.
They should thank their lucky stars that they had to wear masks, or else that we would have gotten a whole lot more.
The lip readers of the world would have loved that hell with that what was coming out of Adam Gates' mouth while he was talking. But like I said, this Jet team is just such a mess. I mean, at this point. It reminds me of the 1-15 96 Jets when I think guys was happy to get a weekly paycheck and go home. All the people want to show up to compete and play because it's like this team is literally so bad. They're literally the only winless team left in the National Football League after 6 weeks. And it's not going to get any better because they play the Bills this week who are season red after losing back-to-back games. And one of those games that had the saga is going to continue. Channel, this is what we're going to do with the Jets for now.
Hey, Rabbi, I'm leaning towards taking the Bills as my suicide pick this week. What do you think?
If they're going against the Jets, it's always a good pick. Okay. And before Anthony basically ruins the whole entire Bills angle, let's continue on with this little stat for you. There are the bottom 9 teams in time of possession in the National Football League. There's only one of them who is not a 1-win team or an NFC East team. That is the Seattle Seahawks. The entire NFC East, by the way, is in that bottom 9 of time of possession, including the Dallas. But we won't talk
Rabbi, did you see the stat of the number of teams in the NFL who, on their own, have as many wins as the entire NFC East combined?
It's got to be at least 5, right?
Well, any team that has 5 wins. Starting with my Steelers.
That's insane. Okay, so about the Buffalo Bills, after we praised Josh Allen on this show, I think we all kind of said he was like this amazing quarterback.
What happened, dude?
His last 2 games, but they were 2 rush situations where you didn't know if you were playing until later in the week. Was pretty bad. Week 5 is easily his worst game. Perfect conditions in Tennessee, 26 for 41 for 263 yards, but a ton of those yards were in garbage time. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. To be fair, against the Chiefs, horrifyingly bad conditions. He was 14 to 27, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 INT. But remember, this is your all-weather quarterback in Wyoming going up against an average defense at best. Josh Allen is up and down, but now here come the Jets, and that's when you should lick your lips and get ready for some good scores. It's a division opponent where Allen can feast this year. Week 1 against the Jets, 33 for 46, 312 yards, and it was one of the first lines that said he was there. He can be there against an average secondary. That's being nice. And gives Stephon Diggs a really good stat line. The first game, he had 8 catches for 86 yards. The Jets are now the human confidence boost, and the human confidence boost this week is going to give Josh Allen a little boost and help the Bills pad their AFC East lead. Yes, I think the Bills are a good suicide pick, and now that I said that for you, get ready for a heart attack game where the Jets actually play well. Okay. Moving on. The NFL is already 7 weeks in. Good God. And we're not talking about COVID this week, although the Raiders' offensive line kind of screwed that up for us. But woohoo! We're not talking about
rescheduled, Rabbi. 2 games rescheduled.
Just 1 game. Well, 2 games rescheduled, but 1 game rescheduled because of the other game. So it's really just one issue. But let's not talk about the Raiders' offensive line. We have 3 burning, non-COVID related questions this week for Around the NFL. Thank God. Anthony, which NFL team should, I still haven't found a good name for this, so I'm going to try it, fail to deliver for Trevor and shut it down right now?
So you mean wave the white flag, in other words?
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm going to go with the Minnesota Vikings. Think about this. 3 years ago, this team was in the NFC Championship game. I mean, how quickly they have fallen since then. It's been somewhat staggering. I don't think even Mike Zimmer has an idea of what's going on. Not when you get blown out at home to a winless Atlanta Falcons team that figured out a way to hold a lead. I mean, I don't know, like holding leads and Atlanta teams don't exactly get used in the same sentence with the Atlanta Falcons.
Sorry, Atlanta.
40 points and the game wasn't even close. But look, the defense has really struggled this year with a young secondary. They only Dallas have a worse minus turnover ratio in the National Football League than Minnesota. Kirk Cousins, who threw 6 interceptions all last year, has only thrown 10 this year, and he was bad in some games. Like two of his interceptions last week were really Hail Mary, desperation throws. But another one, he got hits, he thrown, and there was one shot of Adam Thielen kind of looking over at him like, what are you doing? That's never a good look for a starting quarterback, but he got 2 years, $66 million on that contract extension he signed back in March, and a $41 million cap hit if the Vikings do anything with him. So he's going to be there, but someone who is not there is Yannick Ngakoue. They traded him earlier today to
It's
Baltimore.
like they knew what your ankle was going to be.
Yeah, and they traded for him in the offseason. He led the team in sacks this year. Then you think about another player who is going to be out, Daniel Hunter. He's done for the season. He's going to need surgery for a herniated disc in his neck. Hopefully he gets a speedy recovery. I've had a herniated disc before. That's not a great thing. But Minnesota right now, you're 1-5. You're going into your bye week. You got the Green Bay Packers coming out right after the bye week. Right now, I think the trade deadline coming up, the Vikings should really consider being sellers. Kirk Cousins is going nowhere, but they really should start trying to get some draft collateral back and move some of these pieces like they were able to do earlier today. By the way, they traded Stephon Diggs to
how much is Thielen missing him this year?
Yeah,
done very well. I think it's just Kirk Cousins that missing him, and they have a pretty much Okay, let me interrupt you for a second. It's not like they didn't find a Diggs replacement. Justin Jefferson,
is
going to be the next step on Diggs, or one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. And Kirk Cousins continuously throws it to the other team. His first pass last week, interception. He can honestly be the reason why this team is 1-5 and not 3.
Yeah, and you think about this, Jefferson's actually leading the team in receiving yards. But you know what? When we got a young secondary that was already missing 5 important pieces from last year, that can't stop anyone. They got lit up by Atlanta last week. That and a combination of Kirk Cousins turning the ball over, and there's a reason why you're 1-5 and it's in the cellar of the NFC North Division.
Yep, my niece's daughter is not going to be happy with this segment for whatever inexplicable reason. My niece is a Vikings fan this year. I don't know why, but thankfully she's only 7 and doesn't fully understand what's going on yet, or else she'd probably be as pissed off as every other Viking fan is.
And don't tell Harmony I'm also going to insult the Ducks in the next segment. So
she wrote a letter to the Oregon Ducks.
I know. So it's going to be a very, very bad night for teams that Harmony likes. All right, Jay, you need to give me a contender. Yes, you need to give me a team who wasn't a Super Bowl contender towards the beginning of the season, who is now a Super Bowl contender.
The team that for me that's kind of launched themselves into the conversation. Very much so now that wasn't there at the beginning of the season is a team that you and I talked about on our kickoff show, Rabbi, and that's my Pittsburgh Steelers. And I was hesitant to put them at the same level as the Chiefs and the Ravens. I thought that the return of quarterback Ben Roethlisberger from injury would improve a team that somehow managed to go 8-8 behind a defense that sacked quarterbacks and forced turnovers at an elite rate. But I honestly did not see them being 5-0 heading into back-to-back games against the Titans, the only other undefeated AFC team. And Rabbi, one of your teams, you said to watch at the beginning of the season.
I said 3 teams, and 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
There you go. And after, and as well as their bitter division rivals, the Ravens, who are 5-1.5 half a game behind the Steelers for first place in the AFC North. On papers, guys, the numbers are all very impressive. The defense only allowing 2 ticks under 19 points a game. That's the number 3 scoring defense in the NFL. They're number 1 in the NFL in total yards allowed. Number 1 in both rushing and passing yards allowed. Number 1 in sacks. Number 2 in completion percentage allowed in terms of lowest. And number 3 in passer rating against, again, lowest. And now while they haven't been making as many big splash plays as they did last season, granted before Minka Fitzpatrick's pick 6 this past Sunday, the defense would seem to have been doing its job. They just haven't had to carry the offense like they did last season. And that is because of the aforementioned return of the team's Hall of Fame quarterback. And while this team is in the bottom half of the league in total yards and passing yards per game, the return of Big Ben and what he can do through the air has helped improve a Steelers rushing attack that was barely recognizable last year. A healthy James Conner and improved Benny Snell has helped, has Pittsburgh averaging almost 137 yards per game on the ground, which is number 9 in the NFL. Look, the Steelers don't have a receiver in the NFL's top 25. Juju Smith-Schuster's 23 grabs barely puts him in the top 50. And Chase Claypool's 335 receiving yards puts him in the top 35, though his 19.7 yards per catch is number 2 in the league. His 6 total TDs is in the top 10. But that's because Big Ben's been very adept at spreading the ball around. His top 5 receivers, including tight end Eric Ebron, all have between 24 and 28 targets and between 16 and 23 catches. And outside of Claypool's 335 yards, which far and away leads the team, as does that 19.7 average, the other 4 have between 165 and 194 yards receiving and at least 1 touchdown. Ben's completing 69% of his passes, averaging 235 yards per game, 11 touchdowns against only 1 interception, and his ability to change plays and protections at the line, find or throw open the right receiver is something they were badly missing last season. But like I said, this is on paper, and they have the numbers on both sides of the ball that would seem to say Super Bowl contender. But if you look at their schedule, guys, they really haven't played anyone. The Browns are the only team that they've beaten that had a winning record at the time they played them. And well, let's face it, guys, the Browns always wilt in the face of the Steelers. So to me, that's not a big whoop. Tennessee and Baltimore, are big tests for the Steelers in the next 2 weeks. Cowboys would have been a third if Dak was healthy. So the next 2-3 weeks are going to be challenging. But if the Steelers are 6-2 at the midway point, they'll be in great shape. The back half of the schedule has 1 legit contender, the Ravens in Week 12. And 1 potential contender in the Bills, who host Pittsburgh in Week 14. Look, I felt coming into the season with the return of Ben Roethlisberger that they could go 11-5 and get into the playoffs. I even thought that if they stayed healthy, they could win the AFC North. I still think they can do that, even with linebacker Devin Bush lost for the year with a torn ACL. And we all know that once the playoff starts, anything can happen. Can the Steelers beat the Ravens? Sure. Can they beat the Chiefs? Maybe. The Steelers are in the conversation, Rabbi, but how big a part of that conversation is still very much TBD.
I think the Titans game is a huge game to determine how big that part of that conversation they are. And yeah, I think they need to in their mind, they need to at least split these next 2 games to kind of give themselves a little confidence of, hey, we can hang with the big boys. By the way, Roethlisberger has had a 98 quarterback rating, and again, we don't know exactly what that means. And
I know what that means.
But at least you do. In all 5 of his games this year, which has really helped. Although that unexpected bye week in Week 4 is not going to be anything to write home about.
No, they were really looking forward to having the bye week right before they played the Ravens.
Yes. So, and again, Titans and Ravens, there's no real rest there, especially going up against a team that apparently does really well in the face of COVID. All right. So I'm going to pick the 2 teams that needs to fire their head coaches, one in the AFC and one in the NFC. AFC, how can you not pick Doug Marrone? I know we're all caught up in Minshew mania, and this week Doug Marrone even said I might bench Minshew at the time.
What?
Actually, well, he's had 8 turnovers and a
Fair.
propensity for not making big plays since their season opening win against Indianapolis and their almost win against the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee. So Doug Marrone is in a little bit of trouble. They made the AFC Championship just 3 years ago, and the last 2 years, 5-11 and 6-10. There's been no real true hope of the organization, and if it weren't for the Texans, they may not be the team with any real future and with the bleakest future in the AFC South. They signed Nick Foles last year, and he was a complete disaster and forced them to go to Minshew. And now you see what Nick Foles is doing in Chicago. He's a game manager, and he's managing to win a lot of games. So if this team wants to tank for Trevor, and I think them and the Jets are really the only 2 teams who would be a logical fit for Trevor Lawrence, they might need an organizational reset. And to do that, you need to fire their head coach. As for the NFC, Anthony did pick the Vikings, so I thought Mike Zimmer would have been a good choice in this situation. But you know what? I'm going to stay in the division and just say it's time to say goodbye to Matt Patricia of the Lions.
Ooh.
Although he defeated Marrone this past Sunday, Patricia has last place finishes in 2019 and 2020, and he's probably looking at a 3rd or 4th place finish this year, depending on how the 2 matchups with the Vikings go. The best years of QB Matt Stafford have been wasted. I never seen a quarterback who I want to leave an area so bad. And there's been a ton of failed Patriots assistants, except Mike Vrabel apparently, who have truly failed in the National Football League. The Lions have had very good wide receiver play. Kenny Galladay has become a number 1 wide receiver in the league. DeAndre Smith has been a pretty good back. They had Kerryon Johnson last year, who was a pretty good back. And you know the Lions and running backs haven't mixed since Barry Sanders. Patricia has been a failure, and him and his number 2 pencil might need to go back to being an assistant.
Wow, Rabbi, I'm gonna inject something here. We talked about this in the Giants segment. Sterling Shepard just made his return to the field for the Giants. First time he steps on the field, what does he do? 7-yard reception from Jones, moves the chains, converts a first down.
Considering the Giants defense can't stop a cold right now, I think that's going to be a good thing to do.
Yeah, let's go back to my point. Their inability to get off the field on 3rd down when they have a team backed up. They had Philadelphia 2nd and 25 at the intentional ground and gave up a 15-yard pass. I mean, you can't do that. You're not going to win games if you want to continue to give up yards in chunks like that.
No, but you know what? I mean, we talked about how much Sterling Shepard means to Daniel Jones. It's in the same vein of what Crowder does for Darnold and the Jets. It's a guy, you know where he's going to be. You know that he's going to find a way to get open. He's going to sit down in front of that first down marker, find the open spot in the zone, and say, I got you. Come on. Can
you quintuple team him? Because that's the way then Sam Darnold will never get a pass to out there. Okay, let's talk about that thing that we haven't actually mentioned this year and sport that really shouldn't be played right now because of all of the COVID issues. College football. It is actually 8 weeks in, believe it or not.
Wow, has the season really gone that far?
Well, it has, but because it's going to go into mid-December, it's going to seem like a lot longer. But college football is actually turning the corner this weekend. And with what was a sport in flux due to several 2020 factors, is still a sport in flux, but with more teams! Each of us has a storyline for the rest of October, November, and yes, even December. Jay?
I mean, to me, the big storyline starting this weekend is the return of the Big Ten. And to me, and my brother and I were talking about this, you know, we're both Michigan fans. So for us, college football, if there's no Big Ten, we kind of don't really pay attention. And that's no disrespect to the SEC or the ACC or the Big 12. It's just, to me, college football starts with the Big Ten. So the thing is, it's going to be interesting is, to me, their return is going to be the use case for the college football playoff committee in terms of grading the resumes of teams competing to be in the Final Four. Ohio State, which comes in this weekend ranked number 5 and is the presumptive conference favorite. I mean, and due to the Big Ten's late return to play as compared to the other conferences, they'll be playing less games than the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC. And while the SEC is also only playing a conference-only schedule, the Big Ten is not considered as deep across the board as the SEC, The SEC is having somewhat of an un-SEC type year, which
it's deeper across the board now. I think going into this season it was, but now it's much deeper across the board.
And the Rabbi will get further into that point when his turn comes up. And while Ohio State has been beating up on the Big Ten for the better part of the century, they've always had at least one out-of-conference game against an opponent that burnishes their resume in the eyes of the committee. That won't happen this year. The Big Ten is playing an 8-game conference-only schedule, followed by the first ever Champions Week. Bear with me with this, guys. It'll be played on December 19th, with each school from each division matching up with the school that finished with the same standing in the opposite division, meaning the first place teams in the East and the West will play in the conference championship game. And the rest of the plan is to pit the East Division's number 2 against the West number 2.
My head hurts already.
West number 3, and so on.
Oh my God!
Managed to avoid repeat matchups. So there will be a 9th week. There will be a championship game, but apparently there will be other football going on as well to finish out the season. Hashtag it's 2020. Hashtag it's COVID. Look, the Buckeyes have won the league 3 consecutive years, won every conference game last season by double digits. They're bringing back a Heisman finalist quarterback in Justin Fields, and so far are the only contender unaffected by opt-outs or major injuries. There are questions on the defensive side where the Buckeyes lost 3 first-round draft picks and have a new coordinator, but the cupboard's never bare, and the goal, as always, is CFP berth or bust. Penn State, who is considered the top preseason contender to Ohio State's rule and reign over the conference, lost up the potential National Defensive Player of the Year in Micah Parsons, their linebacker who opted out. And on Monday, they lost a projected first-rounder in running back Journey Brown. They do return starting quarterback Sean Clifford and still have plenty of depth at running back and plenty of production on the defense, so they still should contend in the Big Ten East. The Big Ten West is interesting. Wisconsin is considered the front runner there, having won it 4 times since divisional alignment began in 2014. And if redshirt freshman quarterback Graham Mertz is the real deal, then the Badgers should still be the projected opponents for the Buckeyes on December 19th. Minnesota may also have a shot to come out of the West, as second-team All-Big Ten quarterback Tanner Morgan is back, as is the Big Ten Receiver of the Year, Rashad Bateman, and the entire offensive line. So these teams, plus Ohio State's traditional rival Michigan, are all in the current AP Top 25. Not sure how that happens since they haven't played a game yet. But they all need to play up to their projected best-case scenarios, because even more so than in years past, the Buckeyes may need the rest of the conference, and not just the teams they'll be playing, to play well among themselves so that Ohio State's resume looks good enough in the eyes of the committee to get them into the CFP even with the reduced schedule. The Big Ten is always a conference to watch. They're going to be under the microscope this year more than usual.
Anthony, before we get to you, this is actually where you and I disagree here, just because of the fact that Alabama and Clemson are almost stone-cold lead pipe locks, I feel like, to get into the CFP, only because there's no real contender right now. So I think Ohio State can win themselves out and easily get themselves to the college football playoff. I don't like the fact that they're already ranked number 5, but what can you do, 2020? But one thing that I'll be very interested in seeing is Ohio State goes to Penn State, Halloween night, whiteout conditions. They've done worse against worse Penn State teams, and Penn State is really their only legitimate competition. Sorry, Jay. And in the Big Ten this year.
There's no need to apologize.
Yeah, I just don't think Michigan right now is even in that. It's Ohio State, Penn State, and everybody else.
The Big Ten East is Ohio State, Penn State, and then everybody else.
And we'll see how Michigan does this week against Minnesota. That's a very good 19.
That you know what? That is potentially, other than having to open against Ohio State, which they never do, that is not the way you want to start a season against a team that is in the other division that is stacked.
That is stacked and ready and really ready to go this year after their
11-5 last year was no fluke. So that's
11-2.
Yeah, tough one right out of the gate. Sorry, 11-5 is the AFC is 11-2. 11 wins. No fluke. Tough one out of the gate for the Maize and Blue on Saturday.
You already have those Steelers predictions still in your head. Anyway, Anthony, let's talk about that other division, that other conference that hasn't started just yet.
Yeah, you know what? Listen to Jay try to map out the Big Ten scheduling and how it's managed. It reminds me of this scene from basketball when Kenny Mayne and Dan Patrick is trying to explain the Deslo Cup. And eventually leads to a tie-breaking sack race before you get to the playoffs. That's what it sounded like. literally tuned out about halfway through it. I couldn't do it.
Rabbi,
But,
just
you know
thought
what?
Anthony couldn't come up with more of an offbeat cultural reference.
It's such a good reference,
I
though.
know.
You have to see the
Our
movie.
audience isn't going to get it.
If you want to say something, just talk about our discussion last week about moving the NFL schedule around. So, or that.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm going to talk about the last of the Power 5 conferences that's going to start, and that's the Pac-12. And question is, it's not if they can get anyone into the college football playoff, it's can they do it with just 7 games? I mean, you're already behind the 8 ball starting last. I know Rabbi saying no, but
it's definitely no.
Let me finish my point. It's
a you can, and then I'm going to debunk it.
Of course. But I'm just saying, like, look, you're already behind the 8 ball because you're the last Power 5 conference to start. But also, you're the weaker of the Power 5 conference. I think a lot of people would agree with that.
Yeah.
And they have 2 teams that was ranked in the top 25 in Oregon and USC respectively. But you haven't played any games yet. And even the Big Ten, which starts this weekend, and that could all change almost immediately. But here's the thing, though. The Pac-12 of all the Power 5 conferences is a conference where non-conference games really do play a factor,
yes.
At least impressing the college football playoff committee,
yes.
at least being in the conversation. I mean, it wasn't not too long ago we were talking about Washington a few years ago in Oregon and look at their strength of schedule. But when you're not playing games outside the conference, I mean, that kind of takes away from it. It's not as stacked as say the Big Ten or a household name like the SEC, or even have a powerhouse like Clemson in the ACC, which also have Notre Dame this year too. You gotta keep that in mind. Notre Dame is playing the ACC schedule, but yeah. So the Pac-12 is already behind it's already playing catch up, and the fact that they have to play literally 2 weeks later, and some of the states COVID laws, which also that's the big part of all this as well is how big of a factor is COVID going to play in games cancellations, games being moved around, and in a conference when you're only playing 7 games before you get into a conference championship.
Big Ten, by the way, has already said that every game that's postponed by COVID becomes a no contest. Just to let you know, that was just mentioned today.
Yeah, and that kind of pretty much kind of goes up.
You're gonna have a hockey standings.
Oh, yes, you are.
Yeah, it pretty much going to throw a monkey wrench into any notion that the Pac-12 would have of trying to get into the college football playoff. Coaches like in Washington hoping that they would expand the college football playoff for this year. I don't see that happening whatsoever. So it's going to be really tough. I mean, it's going to be really tough for the Pac-12 to even be part of the conversation because you're looking at a team like Oregon that will probably have to run the table and look really good in doing so. Like, I mean, the margin of victory is going to have to be really really, really dominant good to even be part of the conversation when you have teams in the Big Ten and in the SEC and, like I said, the ACC that are going to be that's going to be routinely part of the conversation. I mean, like Rabbi said, Alabama and Clemson seems to be almost cakewalks to be part of the 2 of the 4 college football playoff teams, bearing a catastrophic meltdown by either team, and also you can't overlook Notre Dame being an independent, but they're playing an ACC type schedule,
and they play Clemson later this year
and
too.
Yes, and playing Clemson, so that could actually determine a spot in a college football playoff in the minds of both in the committee. So like the Pac-12, regardless of who you root for in the Pac-12, that conference as a whole really, really has its work cut out. And the fact that they're starting so late when the other conferences already got a head start to jump on impressing the committee. You know what? Good, more power to you, Rabbi. Now you can. You can kind of chime in and.
Oh, hold on. USC defending there, Jay. USC defending.
I'm not going to defend USC because I'm not sure that they deserve a top 25 ranking.
They didn't even have a top 25 ranking last week.
I know that. What I'm saying is that here's the thing, and I think the big issue here, the Pac-12 wanted to restart its season at the same time as the Big Ten to run things concurrently because of their history with the Rose Bowl, because the Rose Bowl hopefully will still happen this year, and it will pit Big Ten against Pac-12. The big problem was, and this was something that was completely out of their controls, the bulk of the conference plays in California, which has, next to New York, some of the strictest COVID public health rules and regulations going on. It took them forever to get the governor to give them an exception to allow them to play. And until they got it, the Pac-12 couldn't even really move forward with starting round 2 of training camp. So they are stuck behind the 8 ball. And the thing is, the conference isn't that deep to begin with. And I agree with you, Anthony. I don't know that 7 games is enough for any of the teams, even Oregon, who is head and shoulders above everyone else in that conference, to show the committee that they are deserving of a slot. The fact that the Big 12 may not be a lead pipe lock like they have in years past with Oklahoma may provide somewhat of an opening for them to take that 4th spot. But I think Oregon in the Pac-12, more than Ohio State in the Big Ten, needs the rest of that conference to be competitive amongst itself, to allow the committee to even give them a thought of saying, yeah, they may be worthy.
Yeah, and also I'll add
the toughest road of any of the Power Fives.
Yeah, and I'll add to this as well. You got to think about this, not just COVID, but also they've had wildfires in California, and also that has also affected Oregon, that's affected Seattle, obviously where the Washington Huskies are, and the air quality there has been a problem as well. So there's been a lot going on that has affected the Pac-12 as far as trying to get off the ground and playing their conference scheduling. And the COVID restrictions have definitely been a part of this, particularly in California. So like I said, it's going to be very difficult to even be part of the conversation. And now to quote the great Mike Golick, Rabbi, you can poo-poo on my thought.
I can't because you guys have taken up all of the time, so you at least have done your defense in there. Pac-12 is kind of a trash conference this year just because of the fact that Oregon, the best team, has already lost their quarterback, Justin Herbert. I actually think Oregon has a good path, though, because if they go undefeated 7-0, you might not have a lot of competition. Notre Dame might lose a game. There's only one real contender in the SEC. Clemson might destroy everybody else in the ACC. Ohio State is the class of the Big Ten. Oregon goes undefeated. You know what? It's going to be a tough decision for the committee. And God, if they get to that position, I do not envy the college football playoff committee one bit this year, hearing all the talking heads in the ear, and there's really no way to even have any metrics to figure out who the best 4 teams in the nation are. Pac-12 is a shot, but it is a terrible conference, and I don't understand how a team who wasn't ranked gets into the poll even though they still didn't play a game. It's college football logic. It's not even 2020 logic. That's just college football logic. Okay.
Yeah.
SEC has been Alabama and then everybody else. And this year, I mean, obviously LSU won the championship last year, but that was really on the arm of Joe Burrow. And this year they've come right back to life, especially in their season opening loss against Mississippi State. After they were passed everywhere on there. And then Mississippi State has gone to lose each one of their next 3 games because Mike Leach doesn't know defense. And apparently neither does the SEC. The lowest amount of points scored this weekend in a win was 28. Georgia, which had the best defense in the country, led up 41 to Alabama, and Mac Jones right now is really representing a Heisman quarterback and really a Heisman contender. Week before, you had scores like 44-21 as Georgia defeated Tennessee. Florida losing 41-38 against what is probably right now the second best team in the SEC, Texas A&M, who have already lost to Alabama. Auburn giving up 28 and then losing the next week. They should have lost to Arkansas. They did lose to South Carolina, who won 41-7, and they have 2. The SEC is horrible in defense, but Exhibit A to why the SEC is the new Big 12 is the Alabama-Ole Miss game from a few weeks ago. 63-48. You had Ole Miss passing for 2 touchdowns and 4 touchdowns on the ground. Then you had Najee Harris, 5 touchdowns, 23 attempts, 206 yards, plus another 42 through the air. it used to be about defense in the SEC, and honestly, all of college football, and the SEC has just finally caught the plague.
Big 12 hasn't played defense in decades, Rabbi.
I know, but the SEC is now becoming the new Big 12, and the Big 12 is also horrible this year. But that's another story for another time.
I love watching high scoring games where defense is optional at this point.
Defense is optional in almost all of football.
Hey, look, it's 2020, baby. At this point, 10 months in, you gotta embrace the strange and unusual. And Alabama being
but the strange and unusual is the new normal. And
yeah, I mean, you got Alabama and Georgia, two teams that we raved about for years.
Yeah.
Along with our colleagues, Sean, Roman, and Nisa and Steve, about how the defense was so good and they can't stop anybody. They can't stop traffic on 8th Avenue at this point. It is awful. Yikes.
Yeah. How did the Giants still down 10? Or how are the Giants still down 10-7? Did
interception by Daniel Jones, but on the very next play, the Giants picked off Carson Wentz.
Yeah, you know
that was a little after. That was a little after. I guess it was. Wow, a good job by the Giants defense.
James Bradbury being such a good pickup for the Giants. You got that interception and Carson Wentz. You know what? His decision making is just as bad as Daniel Jones. I don't know what the heck he was doing with that throw.
That's fine. The fourth quarter, he'll be fine.
It worked in the Giants' favor.
Anyway, before we continue talking about live football, we need to get out of here. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, my name is Stephen Rabinowitz. Thank you for joining us this week. We are live every Thursday or thereabouts at youtube.com/onthesportsline, at facebook.com/onthesportsline. Caught myself there. You can catch us the very next day via on demand at youtube.com/onthesportslines and at Twitter at ONTH Sportslines, where Mr. Kaplan will be posting up the link to this show right after.
And I will be out of Facebook jail soon enough, but I still got another couple of weeks on probation. So
are you on a 30-day suspension, sir?
It's at 22 right now, and I explained it to you like. It was the strangest thing.
No need to explain it. No need to explain it, Anthony.
But it was, like I said, I'm on Instagram. You can follow me at Strait Sports. You know, Facebook can silence me, but you know what? I am a voice of the voiceless. I would never be silent, ever.
Anyway, next week on the show, we preview something that might be worse than the Red Wedding, Jets versus Chiefs. There will be blood. Anyway, good night, everybody, from On the Sports Lines.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.